Alright, here's our motor. We're going to go over what we've done to that. This is a Triumph T100R motor. This motor matches the numbers on the frame, so at least the cases were the original ones that came with this frame. It's a 500cc vertical twin, hemispherical combustion chambers, 2 valves per cylinder. At the time this was built, this was probably close to a state-of-the-art motor with the type of head that was on it. When I received this, the head was off the motor. The head had already been disassembled, the valves had been taken out, the rocker boxes were off. From the cylinders down, everything was still assembled. I spec'd everything. The seats on the valves were bad. One valve was slightly bent. There was a ding in the one cylinder, well, I should say in the one piston where the valve had contacted the piston. The seats in the head had pits in them from rust. The valve guides were worn out. The springs were probably original. So I went ahead, ordered all new valves, new valve guides, new inner and outer springs, new head gaskets. We got 4 new head bolts here. Really, the old head bolts were usable, but there was severe corrosion here, and from an aesthetic point of view, the customer actually wanted to replace those, so that was fine with me. Recut the seats in the head, checked the spring height, and closed seat pressure, so we had to shim all the springs and get the spring height right and get the seat pressure correct. Skim milled the head, and then reassembled everything. On these rocker box caps here, this is your intake rocker shaft here, which goes the length of the rocker box shaft of the rocker box. This is your exhaust rocker shaft here, which goes the length of this rocker box. Now, when these were manufactured, the bore that this shaft sits in is a line bore. And I noticed when assembling these, probably from heat or abuse or whatever, these bores were no longer aligned where the shaft would slide easily in. And it would slide in almost to where the end of the shaft goes in here, and then I've noticed that this shaft was slightly offset, and I had to push it over to get it to go in and then tap it in. Well, on the end of this shaft is an O-ring groove machined into the shaft that an O-ring sits on that seals this here to keep oil from exiting out the rocker box through the gap between the shaft and the rocker box. Well, because of the preload on that shaft and the way these caps were slightly warped, it would cut the O-ring when I pushed them in. And I noticed when I disassembled these that they had used sealant around here. So they must have had this problem in the past, the last time it was assembled. So I took the shafts back out, removed the O-rings, put the shafts back in, and that's what we're going to have to do on this project, is we're going to have to use sealer around here. The only other remedy for that would be to get new rocker box caps. And because this is a budget build, we're going to go ahead and put sealer around here and leave that preload on these shafts. We also ordered a new Boyer micro digital ignition. We wanted to get rid of the point setup on here for reliability reasons. I'm going to remove this cover right now. I previously removed it, so I'm just going to go through it real quick. Remove this timing unit, retaining nut. Remove these 2 screws here, which are your points plate bolts. We're now going to remove our points plate. These wires, normally there's wires going through here and out the bottom. These wires were already removed when I received this, and there was also parts missing on this points plate. So we're going to pull this off. The next step would be to remove our gear case cover bolts, which have already been done. I'm going to pull the advance unit out. I'm going to remove the gear case cover. Okay, we have our timing gear here, our intermediate gear. We have our intake cam gear and our exhaust cam gear. On this Triumph, it's a dry sump system, and they use a twin plunger oil pump. So we have our scavenge pump, which is the bigger plunger, and our pressure pump, which is the small plunger. These operate on an eccentric off of the intake cam. They go up and down as the cam spins. The one plunger scavenges the sump, turns that oil to your oil box. The other plunger takes oil from your oil box, pressurizes it, sends it to the lower end. While talking to the customer on this motor, I asked him if he had ever changed the primary case oil or the gear case, the transmission oil. He was unaware that there was actually 3 separate oil cavities in this motor. Due to the nature of this project, when the motor first came in, I asked him whether he wanted to do like a ground-up restoration or just do a top end and get it running. And he opted for the top end because of the money situation. So he said it ran and shifted and didn't make any funny noises out of the bottom end when he brought it in. So we're going to hope that when we fire this baby up, that our primary chain and our transmission are all good. In the meantime, we're going to drain the oil out of the transmission case, out of the primary chain case, and then we'll refill that with the proper fluid.